All right, good afternoon. Welcome to your Urban Affairs Committee. Today is February 14th, 2023. I am Senator Terrell McKinney. I represent District 11, and I'm the chairman of the Urban Affairs Committee. And before we start, I will have each senator introduce themselves. Start at my right.
Brian Harden, District 48, Scottsbluff, Banner, Kimball Counties.
John Lowe, District 37, Gibbon, Shelton, and Kearney.
Good afternoon, Senator Carol Blood, representing part of Bellevue and Papillion, Nebraska.
Thank you. And the committee legal counsel is Elsa Knight, and the committee clerk is Raquel Dean. Today and before all hearings to be heard will be posted on the hearing room. The senator introducing the proposed legislation will present first. Senators who serve on the committee are encouraged to ask questions for clarification. That said, the presenter and those testifying are not allowed directly to question senators on this committee. For purposes of accuracy for the record, we ask each presenter to state one's name, spell it, and state who you represent, if not yourself. If you're planning to testify today, please fill out the testifier sheets that are on the table in the back of the room. Be sure to print clearly and fill them out completely. When it is your turn to come forward to testify, give the testifier sheet to the page or the committee clerk. And if you are testifying today and on whichever bill and you're sitting in the back, please feel free to move up. If you do not wish to testify but would like to indicate your position on the bill, please complete the sign-in sheets on the back table. This sheet will be included as an exhibit in the official hearing record. And your Urban Affairs Committee will use the light system to promote maximum engagement to those wishing to express their position on proposed legislation before us. The light system will generally be 5 minutes with the green light and 1 minute with the yellow. With the red light, you are asked to conclude. We will recognize opponents, proponents, neutral testifiers, and we also acknowledge letters received from all concerned parties. Should you have handouts you wish to share, please share 10 copies or ask the committee clerk to make copies. The clerk will then distribute any handouts to the committee. Following all proponent, opponent, and neutral testimony, the bill's presenter is offered the opportunity to close with final remarks. As a committee, we will work diligently to give full and fair hearings, and we will make effort to accommodate special requests if needed. At this hearing, we ask you to be respectful of the process and to one another, and please silence your phones or turn them off. Thank you. And Senator Linehan, you can begin.
Thank you, Chairman McKinney and members of the Urban Affairs Committee. My name is Lou Ann Linehan, L-O-U, capital A-N-N, Linehan, L-I-N-E-H-A-N. And I'm from Legislative District 39, which is Elkhorn and Waterloo, surrounding areas in Douglas County. I am here today. I was going to introduce two bills, 691 and 693, but the reasons for these bills has dissipated, gone away. MUD and the city of Omaha to come to an agreement. So I would ask that you IPP both bills.
Okay, thank you. Before you go, I just had a question. I was wondering if you got any answers on this. According to the statutes, it says that Metro Transit shall have full and exclusive jurisdiction and control over transit. So what authority is going to be over the streetcar?
I have, as you know, Senator McKinney, from our conversations, I have a lot of questions about what's going on with streetcar. But this is one subject that has been settled. I don't quite understand, and I'm not a lawyer, so hopefully make it public and many people will come to. I don't understand how we can have a streetcar authority without elected people being on there. And I don't know if they're planning on running it. I think this is all very, but I will say, and I'm very happy, I have gotten calls from the city that they're going to be, they've offered, they've offered to brief us more thoroughly on it. So I look forward to that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any proponents? Any opponents? Any neutral? And with that, we close the hearing on LB 691 and 693. And I forgot to mention our page for today is Sophia. She's a student at UNL. She's a senior studying political science and pre-law. And for 691, there was 4 proponent online comments, 0 opponent, 0 neutral. And for 693, there were 5 proponents, 0 opposition, and 0 neutral.
You want opponents?
No.
Yeah.
Whose bill is this? Holdcroft. We're gonna wait for Senator Holdcroft to come.
Yeah. He was expecting those 2 bills to last a little longer. Town, kind of like Estes Park, so it's kind of a seasonal town. This is their dead season.
All right. How you doing, Senator Holdcroft?
I'm doing well. And you, Senator McKinney?
You're doing good. Thanks for coming.
You bet.
You can begin when you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman McKinney and members of the Urban Affairs Committee. For the record, my name is Senator Rick Holdcroft, spelled RICKHOLDCROFT, and I represent Legislative District 36, which includes Western and Southern Sarpy County. I am here today to discuss LB 274, which would allow holders of license plates for disabled American veterans, or DAV plates, to park in stalls otherwise designated for persons in possession of a handicap placard or license plate. There are currently 1,340 DAV license plate holders in the state of Nebraska. While exact numbers aren't available, it is logical to assume that some DAV plate holders have also been issued handicapped parking placards. According to the Nebraska Department of Motor Vehicles, as of December 31st, 2022, there were 172,469 valid handicap parking permits in the state. There are also 5,452 valid handicap license plates issued in Nebraska. There is not any data available on the total number of handicap parking spots in Nebraska. According to research by the Council of State Governments, Midwestern states have varying statutory language and rules on this issue. It is common for states to provide specialty license plates for disabled veterans. More variation occurs over whether these plates come with special parking privileges, such as parking in handicapped areas. In many Midwestern states, disabled veterans with these plates still must separately secure handicap stickers, placards, plates in order to park in handicapped spots. Please refer to your handout for additional details. My office made a research request to the Legislative Research Office. They conducted a 50-state survey to determine how many states currently allow disabled veterans to obtain a disabled veteran license plate, and if so, is the plate holder given accessibility or handicapped parking privileges? The research found that 40 states currently issue some type of license plate to disabled veterans that, with some variances, allows them the ability to park in handicapped stalls. Kansas has added some restrictions since this chart was published. The qualifications to obtain a disabled veteran license plate vary between states, but the most common qualification requires the veteran to be considered as permanently and totally disabled with a service-connected disability. Typically, a letter from the Department of Veterans Affairs is required, stating the veteran has a disability rating of at least 100%. Again, this criterion varies between states. A table created by research and analyst Jeffrey Fryman was handed to each of you. The table lists all of the states currently offering this benefit to disabled veterans. The table includes the relevant statutes, requirements to obtain the license plates, and also an image of each of the 41 disabled veteran license plates that allow the parking privileges. We made contact with veteran service agencies in some of our neighboring states, including North Dakota and South Dakota. Their statements are included with your exhibits. As an example, the state commissioner of the Department of Veterans Affairs in North Dakota told us that during the 2013 legislative session, Senate Bill 2120 was passed, amending state law to allow 100% disabled veterans who have the DAV license plate displayed on their vehicle to park in handicap parking. He says that the bill was supported by the North Dakota Veteran Service organizations and their leadership. His office has not received any negative feedback from the law. A preliminary conversation with legal counsel for the DMV indicates that they expect any expenses incurred to implement this program would be minor and not subject to any appropriation. I am wanting to present a clean bill to this committee at this time. If there is interest in revising the current design of the DAV license plate, including the possible addition of the international symbol of access, it could be addressed in an amendment to the bill by this committee or be addressed by future legislation. Not all of the injuries sustained by our veterans are physical, and not all of them are immediately visible just by casual observation. And this bill does more than just provide parking convenience for disabled vets. It is also a tangible way that we can thank them for their service and honor them for putting themselves in harm's way and then living the consequences. Chairman McKinney and members of the Urban Affairs Committee, thank you for your consideration of LB 274. I believe this bill is a significant and substantial way that we can honor members of our armed forces that have received injuries or impairments in conjunction with their military service. I would appreciate a yes vote to advance the legislation, and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee?
Yes,
Senator Lowe.
Thank you. So what degree of disability do you have to get one of these plates?
you have to have 100% disability. Your disability has to be 100% related to your service. In other words, whatever disability you have is 100% related to your service, however long that might be.
would say missing a finger, missing a hand or something like that qualify?
Yes, if you lost it
During-
during your service.
All right, thank you very much.
Senator Black.
Thank you, Chair McKinney. Senator Holdcroft, I think this is a good opportunity to explain how people are identified as being 100% disabled. It's not usually one thing in most cases, multiple things. Can you just do like a really brief synopsis to help Senator Lowe with that?
Sure. So when you come in, obviously, when you're in the service, you get annual physicals. So we know when you start in the service what your condition is, and typically, if you have to be pretty fit to be admitted into the armed services of the United States. Well, when you leave the service, whether it is at the end of 2 years, 4 years, or a 20-year career, you're given a discharge physical, and then there's a determination of what disabilities that you've incurred during your time in the service, and they can be 10%, 20%, 30%. But if 100% of those can be attributed to your time in the service, then you're eligible for disabled veteran plate.
Thank you.
Senator Black.
Thank you. And for clarification, so maybe hearing is 30% and a hand is 20%. The percentages, I mean, not quite that easily, but basically add up and can be 100%, correct?
Well, yes, but you can be like 20% disabled, but if 100% of that can be related to your disability while you're in the service, then it's 100% disability.
I think it's confusing for people that haven't worked with it, and I just want to make sure we're clear on the record. Thank you.
Senator Lowe.
Thank you. So would you say today is a great Navy day?
Every day is a great Navy day.
Thank you.
I have a question. I'm looking online at some like the online comments or online statements, and there's one from the DMV that's neutral, and I'm going to read it, and I just want to get your response on it or how you feel. The DMV requested committee to consider compatible federal compliance requirements, as LB 274 will put the state out of compliance with the federal requirements. The current definition for handicapped or disabled person for purposes of obtaining a handicap permit or plate under the rules is modeled after the federal definition. Additionally, it requires a medical provider certification to provide satisfactory evidence that the applicant meets the physical limitations outlined in the definition of a handicapped or disabled person found under the rules. And they also stated, although 274 authorizes motor vehicles with DAV plates to park in handicap or disabled parking spaces, the qualification requirements for DAV plates are not the same as those required for handicap plates or permits. The rules identifies the qualification requirements for a DAV plate as a veteran of the United States Armed Forces who was discharged or otherwise separated with the characterization of honorable or general, who was classified by the United States Department of Veteran Affairs as 100% service-connected disabled. And they also state LB 274 does not harmonize the qualifications of this plate with the federal requirements and statutory requirements. How do you feel about that?
Okay, so the purpose of this bill is not to be, frankly, be in compliance with the federal definition of handicap immobile. So this only requires that you be 100%, you have a DAV plate, which means you're 100% disabled. It may be loss of hearing or loss of high blood pressure, which may not affect your mobility. So in that case, we would not meet the requirements of the federal requirements for parking in a handicap spot. But the reason I'm bringing this bill forward is to recognize that sacrifice, whether it is mobility related or not mobility related, to recognize the sacrifice that our disabled veterans have made to their country and allow them to be able to park a little bit closer to the front door. So that's kind of the rub here. If you want to look at it that way, we will not be in compliance with federal regulations as far as being able to park in a handicap spot, but, other states have certainly done it and authorized, non-mobility impacted veterans to park in handicap spots with the plate.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions from the committee? Seeing none,
I will be here for close.
okay, and we'll take the first proponent.
Afternoon, committee, chairman. My name is R.G. Smith. I'm here representing myself. And I thought I was organized enough.
Can you spell your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, S-M-I-T-H, R.G. S-M-I-T-H.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me a second. Okay. I've done a lot of research. I'm a disabled veteran. I moved here in 2020 from Nevada. And the only reason I got involved with this is because in Nevada, they recognize disabled veterans at 100% to have a handicap parking access. I asked DMV why they did this, and they basically told me it's a way to honor the sacrifices and service of what disabled veterans have done. So when I moved here, I was a little disappointed to find out that the DAV plate did not have that same thing. So I went into a research mode, and I spent hours and hours and hours researching all the states, the laws, the legislation. And I actually have probably a little more information than Senator Holdcroft has given you, so I can answer any questions afterwards. But basically, it works like this. Federal law requires that all states recognize disability access plates from all other states and countries. There's 33 states have an international symbol of access available for disabled veteran plates. This is a trend to standardize and create uniformity between states. Currently, there are 16 states, Arizona, California, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maine, Maryland, Montana, Nevada, North Carolina, North Dakota, Ohio, and Tennessee, with similar legislation as LB 274 with the following proposed amendments that I'm proposing. So one is that the DMV requires a certified letter from the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs on the initial application, or in our case, or on file with the Nebraska Department of Veteran Affairs, which includes the following information. This is what the letter contains. The applicant has one or more service-connected disabilities. The applicant is being paid at the 100% rate. The applicant is considered to be totally and permanently disabled. Number two, what I'm proposing is to modify our current plate that says DAV on it to read disabled veteran and allow the plate for disabled veterans who rate less than 100% with no handicap access. Number three, have a new plate with the ISA that reads disabled veteran for 100% disabled veterans. So there's several states, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maine, Maryland, Ohio, Oregon, South Carolina, and Tennessee. They make the license plate permanent for disabled veterans to reduce costs for DMV as well as the disabled veteran. Why have a disabled veteran plate? One, the majority of states recognize a disabled veteran service in this manner. Two, on behalf of a state's citizens, a great way to honor service and sacrifice. Three, if a disabled veteran is having a medical issue, people may become more willing to assist them than they would a complete stranger. Disabled veteran license plates are issued in recognition of a resident's military service connected disabilities. I encourage this committee to adopt my proposed amendments in order to preserve the legislative intent for all disabled veterans. Additionally, to help justify my support for this type of legislation, I submit to you HCON Resolution 336, which is in your packet there. And then thank you for your time and consideration on this important legislation. There was one more thing I was going to add. I think, a lot of people don't understand the 100% thing. So the way that works, I'm a 100% disabled veteran, but you look at me, you couldn't tell it. But I'm legally, right now, without my glasses or contacts, I'm legally blind right now. So I got 2200 vision, okay? I have some other medical problems too, but the way the VA works is if you have a disability for 30%, and then you have a second disability for 30%, you can, Senator Blood was talking about that. If you combine them, our math is 60%. It doesn't work that way with the VA, it's 50%. So you actually have to work harder at having things connected to your service to get to the 100. So it's not easy to get to the 100% rate without missing a leg or something like that.
Okay, can you wrap up?
Yes, I'm done.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify that because I think I know where Senator Blood was going with that.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Can I,
Oh.
sorry.
Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chairman. I apologize. What was your name, sir?
RG Smith. Sorry.
Sarge, Mr. Smith, thank you for your service. Thanks for being here. I walked in a little late, so I might be behind the ball. So under the bill as it's written, anybody who has any level of disability would qualify, or what's?
No, the way the bill's written now is that anybody with that DAV plate, it would just become handicap accessible. The problem with that is Nebraska had a thing going on. When I moved here, I filled out my application for that plate. And it basically said that if your disability that you had from the service was 100%, not 100% disability, but let's say you had a disability and 30%, but it was 100% related to the military. So that wasn't the intent when DMV did that. That wasn't their intent. So actually some disabled veterans was able to acquire that plate without being 100%. So when I pulled up the application now that they took off that language, and I talked to the Nebraska Department of Veteran Affairs, and they told me that's the reason they took that off, because some people got that plate that maybe only had 30%, okay, because of the way the language. So that's why they took it off the application. So that's why I'm proposing that we make that plate for all disabled veterans. And then we have a new plate with the ISA just for 100% disabled veterans. That way, we don't have, other people parking in that. And then the reason that Nevada recognizes they do this, for example, as well as these other 15 states, is because, if you're not able to, if you have that much wrong with you as 100%, it's kind of like, maybe you might need that space. People don't need the license plate. Nobody's forced to get that. If they want to keep the disabled veteran plate, the one we have now or whatever, that's fine. Or they can have a regular plate. But it's nice that a state recognizes our service and sacrifice in this manner. And I felt good when I found out that Nevada did that when they didn't have to. So.
Well, thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, no problem.
Are there any other questions? Senator Lowe?
Thank you. Did you serve on the Constellation?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any others? No? Seeing?
Okay, if you have any questions or
Thank you.
concerns, please feel free to contact me. Like I said, I did a lot of hours of research on this, so I put a lot of effort into this. Thank you, everybody.
Any other proponents? Any other proponents? Opponents?
Good afternoon. My name is Greg Holloway, GregHolloway. I see a couple familiar faces in here, but most of you, I've never testified at this committee before. I've been doing this for about 25 years, and it's kind of nice to come to this committee for a change. I am actually the legislative advocate for the Nebraska Veterans Council and also the legislative advocate for the Department of Nebraska Disabled American Veterans. I'm past state commander for the Disabled American Veterans, past state commander for the Vietnam Veterans of America. I'm the co-chair for the Nebraska Veterans Council, and I'm the co-chair for the Nebraska Veterans Home. Those are some of my credentials. I was a county veteran service officer for Lancaster County back in the 90s, so I'm very well versed on 100% service-connected disabilities because I've applied for it myself. I'm a combat wounded Vietnam veteran from 1968, and I draw 100% service-connected disability, what's called an S award also, which I have one service-connected disability at 100%, and I have combined service-connected disabilities at 60 or more. So it gives me a few more bucks to spend. Okay, so I'm pretty up on service-connected disabilities. Now, the Nebraska Veterans Council is comprised of the 8 veterans recognized, nationally recognized and accredited veteran service organizations in the state of Nebraska, the United States, and also the Nebraska County Veteran Service Officers Association. And we voted at our meeting to oppose this bill. The paralyzed veterans oppose it very much because a couple things. There's 2 ways of being a 100% service-connected disabled veteran. One is called individual unemployability. If your service-connected disabilities keep you from being able to work at your profession, you could get what's all considered individual unemployability, and which keeps you rated at 100%. And then you have the 100% service-connected disability like I have, that's permanent and total. Now, I thought about doing this years ago. Paralyzed veterans said, we're going to kick your butt if you do it. So I researched it. That was when I found out one of my service, I was wounded severely by a grenade, blew the back of my head out. All right. I have what's called a 0% service-connected disability for what's called organic brain syndrome. 100% of that 0% was service-connected. So that would have gotten me the plate. Now, they're saying that they changed that. I don't know if they did or not. To be honest with you, DMV might have changed it because they make up their own rules. You know, once they pass a bill, then they make up their own rules to apply that bill. And DMV was doing that. Keith Freckinger was the director of Department of Veterans Affairs when they changed that. So if you have to be 100% permanent total now, that's fine and dandy. But there's a lot of plates out there that they're not 100% service connected. They're rated at a lot less. Now, also I know a guy that's 100% service connected for hearing loss. If you're deaf in one ear as a result of your military service, you can be 100%. He's 100% permanent total. Permanent total means there's no scheduled appointments. So you're not going to have to go in for another physical or anything like that. So you could be 100% for hearing loss. All the veterans organization, we need to just forget this bill, start all over. The DAV license plate that's in, I helped put it together. My license plate number is number 12. So I've been around for a long time. If they want to develop a brand new plate in John Hilgert's office, the Department of Veterans Nebraska said they'll help us put it together, a new plate, because we might have to get rid of this plate to start with, because the disabled, we didn't ask the disabled American veterans to use DAV. Now they're at the midwinter conference now, we're asking them permission to use that plate so we can keep that plate. They might say we have to get rid of that plate completely and not use it because it might not be legal actually. We didn't think of that. I didn't think about that when we said, let's do this. So we just need to kind of forget this bill, start over. Next year, short session, just write a new one, bring it in. All right. I will answer any questions that you have to ask, and I'm ready to answer questions.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony today, and thank you very much for your service. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Lowe.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hunt, and thank you, Mr. Holliday, for being here today. And I agree with Senator Hunt. Thank you for your service. I think all of us would agree with that. So you think you can do it internally with the Veterans Affairs Department?
We could develop a new plate through the Nebraska Veterans Affairs would assist in that plate. Then again, you put a new plate that allows disabled veterans that are rated at 100%, odds are the PVA, Paralyzed Veterans of America, is going to come in and argue against it. So odds are.
So you're talking maybe about 2 plates then for the veterans? the
Well,
disabled
we might
veterans?
have to just forget this one and start all over.
Yeah.
And it's going to be logistically, we'll have to figure out how to grandfather all those plate holders in now. So there'll still be plate holders that are not 100%. I mean, that's not fair to them to say, okay, you can't have your license plate no more. Because that's what I thought when I was going to do this. I said, I'm going to get beat up a lot, you know. And I've been around a long time, and I'm the voice of all the veterans in the state, really, basically. All the veterans that are members of veterans organizations. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Senator Lowe. Any other questions? Senator Kavanaugh?
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you. Is it Holloway?
Holloway.
Holloway. Thank you, Mr. Holloway. Thank you for your service. Reiterate what everybody else said. I'm just trying to wrap my mind around the opposition. So would there be opposition just to allowing folks with a disabled veterans plate to use a handicapped parking spot?
I would be 99.99% correct if I said the Paralyzed Veterans of America would oppose that type of legislation. To have just a disabled veteran license plate be able to access handicap parking.
And what's the reason for the opposition to that?
Because they feel that you don't have enough you could be 100% and not have enough physical disabilities to utilize a handicap parking place.
Okay.
Now, any veteran that is in the VA system that goes to the VA medical center can ask their primary care physician to obtain the paperwork and fill it out for him to get a handicap placard. I have one because I do have mobility issues once in a while. My leg bothers me. When I was wounded, I blew a hole completely through my left foot and shredded my right leg. So I have mobility issues once in a while. It all depends on what car I drive. If I drive my pickup, I'm good. If I drive my little Ford Focus, it takes me a while when I get out of it to get moving. So I can get that handicap placard. You want to fix something, handicap placards say permanent and there's an expiration date on it. That don't make any sense to me, but pretty much anybody can get, it's easy to get a handicap placard from the VA. Easy.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much for indulging me. All right.
Next opponent to LB 274. Welcome to your Urban Affairs Committee.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Robert John Tobin, Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Army, retired. Tango Oscar Bravo, Indio November.
Sorry, for the transcribers, can I have you spell your first and last name with the regular letters?
Robert, R-O-B-E-R-T, T-O-B-I-N.
Thank you. It's not for our benefit, it's for transcribers.
Right,
Thank
yeah,
you.
Okay, I oppose LB 274. I was wounded in combat in Baghdad, 15 June 2007. I was awarded the Purple Heart for wounds sustained by enemy fire. As a Purple Heart recipient, like most other such recipients, I've got a Purple Heart license plate, not a DAV license plate. Before surgery and physical therapy at the VA, I spent months having to walk with a cane. Now I walk with a limp, but I can walk. Everybody with a Purple Heart license plate, and I think there might be about 200 of us, I don't know that for a fact, but everybody with a Purple Heart license plate by definition has combat-derived wounds, which may or may not diminish their ability to walk. By contrast, membership in the Disabled American Veterans does not require that one have disabilities associated with combat deployment or to be a combat veteran at all. In fact, most DAV members are veterans of peacetime service or veterans from a time of war, but who never deployed into combat. And DAV members, again, may or may not have disabilities that diminish their ability to walk. Now, I'm told by the VA that later my wounds and injuries will probably diminish my ability to walk, at which time I can always apply for a handicap parking permit, which I'll do. I see no reason to assume that all DAV members need handicap parking permits any more than that all Purple Heart license plate recipients need such permits. In both cases, individuals who have disabilities involving diminished ability to walk can independently apply for handicap parking permits. For these reasons, I oppose LB 274. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Talbot. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for your service. Next opponent to LB 274. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Senator Hunt and committee members, for the opportunity to speak today. For the record, my name is Amanda Vasquez, and I am the Government Relations Director for the Paralyzed Veterans of America Great Plains Chapter. And I am here to oppose LB 274 as it would negatively impact quality of life for paralyzed veterans and others with a mobility impairment who rely on accessible parking to remain independent, active members of their community. My name is spelled AMANDAVAZQUEZ. LB 274 would automatically allow a veteran who is 100% service-connected disabled and has a DAV license plate to park in a handicap parking space. What you may know now is that a veteran with a DAV plate can be 100% service-connected for a disability unrelated to their ability to walk. With the passage of this bill, veterans without a need for a handicap parking space would legally have the right to park in a space that is designated for people who do have limitations to their mobility and often have no other options for parking. Currently, Nebraska state law allows an individual, veteran or non-veteran, to apply for a handicap license plate or placard who has a certified medical condition limiting personal mobility, resulting in the applicant's inability to travel more than 200 feet without assistance, such as a wheelchair, crutch, walker, prosthetic, or other device. A veteran with a 100% rating through the VA may not have a limitation to their mobility, making them unqualified for handicap parking. Yet under this bill, if passed, those veterans would automatically qualify simply based on their 100% rating. State law already allows disabled veterans to apply for handicap parking the same as anyone else who truly needs the accessibility offered by these spaces. This bill would cause handicap parking spaces to be more difficult to access because they could be used lawfully by people who do not need the accessibility they provide. People with mobility limiting conditions are already at a disadvantage when accessing the community. For someone who uses a wheelchair and drives independently, they rely on the designated handicap parking spaces wherever they go. Handicap spaces are very limited. By law, only one handicap space is required for every 25 regular spaces. For very large parking lots, there may be many spaces available, but for many parking lots, those spaces are extremely limited and often filled up. These spaces make it possible for a person to exit and re-enter their vehicles without navigating long distances through busy parking lots where other drivers may not see them. Situations where all of the handicap parking spaces are filled happen more often than you might think. A 2018 national survey of 4,000 people with disabilities found that 96% of respondents said accessible parking was key to their independence. 52% reported they were forced to turn back because there was no accessible parking available to them. This has unfortunately happened to many of the veterans we serve as well. If you talk to a person who uses a wheelchair, I can almost guarantee they will have a story to share about how they missed an event, couldn't shop where they wanted, or were late for an appointment, all because they couldn't find an open handicap parking space. People with limited mobility, especially those who drive independently and need handicap parking, literally choose whether to participate in an event, meeting, or other activity based on the likelihood that there will be accessible parking for them. This has a major negative impact on their quality of life. LB 274 would allow veterans who do not have a need for handicap parking to legally park in these spaces, taking away an opportunity from someone who does need that space. It is already a significant problem, negatively impacting quality of life for people with disabilities, and this bill would exacerbate the situation. I understand that this bill is an effort to honor disabled veterans, but it would be at great cost to the independence and quality of life of the subset of paralyzed veterans and others with mobility challenges. Let's find another way to honor disabled veterans without causing more hardship to those who already face barriers to parking. I hope you will oppose LB 274 and keep handicap parking for those who really need it. Thank you for the opportunity, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Vasquez. Senator Blood.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hunt. How are you today, Amanda?
I'm good. How are you?
It's nice to see you. I am well, thank you. I have a quick question, and it pertains to not only the bill, but some language that I talk about a lot, and I'm interested in getting on record today. So what I loved is your next to the last paragraph. You said people with disabilities, but then you go to the next paragraph, and of course your organization is PPA, I think, right?
Yes.
When are we going to get our veterans, including things like license plates, caught up with the rest of the communities of disabilities? Because in those communities, we always put the person first, which of course you did, people with disabilities, Nebraskans with disabilities.
Right.
But we're still behind when it comes to honoring our veterans, and we still say disabled veterans. Do you see that changing? And I know we'd have to change all these organizations' names like DV, but we talk about dignity, we talk about respect. Why are we not putting the veteran's name before the disability?
That's a very good point. I do not have an answer to that. The organizations have been around for a long time. Our national has been around for over 75 years. Here, our chapter in Omaha has been around for over 50. So it's not something that's come up internally among the veterans that we serve, but it is a fair point. It is certainly needed, and we work on that as far as person first language in the community. So thank you for your thoughts on that.
I have concerns when we want to label things, knowing that we're labeling things in a way that I feel is disrespectful to veterans. And I know we're not doing that to be disrespectful, but I want to put the person first. So you'll probably hear me ask that every time you come in front of me for future reference. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blood. Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you.
Any other opponents to LB 274? Come on down. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Hunt and committee members, for the opportunity to speak today. For the record, my name is Mary Bushman. It is spelled MaryBushman. I'm the Executive Director for the Paralyzed Veterans of America Great Plains Chapter, and I am also the mother of a 28-year-old daughter born with the birth defect spina bifida. Her name is Stephanie, and she has used a wheelchair since she was 2 years old. Both Stephanie and I are on the board of directors for Nebraska Spina Bifida, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to improving the lives of children and adults born with spina bifida. I am here to oppose LB 274 as it would negatively impact quality of life for paralyzed veterans and also others with mobility impairments who rely on accessible parking to remain independent and active members of their community. LB 274 would automatically allow a veteran who is 100% service-connected disabled and has a disabled American Veterans license plate to park in handicap parking a space, even if their disability does not impact their mobility. If this bill passes, these spots would be taken away from people with mobility issues who often have no other options for parking. My coworker Amanda Vasquez from Paralyzed Veterans of America Great Plains chapter has just given testimony as to how this bill would negatively impact paralyzed veterans if the demand for handicap parking is increased, but the supply of handicap parking spaces remains the same. I fully support her testimony, and in addition, I would like to testify as to the ripple effect that LB 274 could have on the greater disabled community. For a person using a wheelchair, venturing out into the community can be scary because you don't always know how accessible the place you're going to be, how accessible the place you're going to, it will be. Maintaining a job and having a social life can be even extra challenging. One of the primary goals of Nebraska Spina Bifida is to help our members to become active, contributing members of society. This means they need access to places of employment, doctor's offices, pharmacies, grocery stores, restaurants, entertainment venues, and businesses. And this access begins in parking lots. The first challenge that wheelchair users face before they even try to enter an establishment is finding a parking space and safely exiting their vehicle. Adults who use a wheelchair and drive a ramp van are already limited because they not only have to find a handicap parking spot, but they need to find one with a ramp access aisle next to it. This is the same for a parent who drives their van to transport their child who uses a wheelchair. Many of us take independence for granted and sometimes even grumble because we have to do something by ourselves. But for a person with a disability, independence is cherished. Driving independently and having an accessible vehicle is never taken for granted. How many times have you all gone to an event and you've had to drive around the parking lot looking for a parking space? Maybe you had to park in the very back of the lot, or maybe you even had to go into the neighborhood streets to find a parking space. But you did this because the event you were going to was important and you wanted to be there. You didn't want to miss it. Well, for a person who needs handicap parking, especially ramp access, if there's not a handicap spot available for them, they don't have the option of parking somewhere else. And they could be forced to miss out on whatever the activity was that they were planning on going to, no matter how important it was to them. If this activity was a doctor's visit, a pharmacy pickup, or a trip to the grocery store, this is not just unfortunate, but it could have an adverse effect on a person's health and well-being. LB 274 would allow veterans who may not have a need for handicap parking to legally park in these spaces. The need for handicap parking is already greater than the supply of spaces in many parking lots. And unfortunately, incidents of handicap parking abuse exist. This bill would make the situation even worse. If a veteran with a DAV license plate needs a handicap parking permit, there's a process in place for he or she to obtain one. By just giving handicap parking access to all veterans with DAV plates, even if they don't need it, LB 274 is in effect hurting veterans it sets out to help. If LB 274 passes, not only will it hurt paralyzed veterans, but it will have a negative ripple effect on the larger disability community by increasing demand for an already limited supply of handicap parking spaces. LB 274 would lessen the independence and quality of life for a segment of our population, including my daughter, who faces challenges every day of their lives. I hope you will oppose LB 274 and protect handicap parking for those who really need it.
Thank you, Ms. Bushman. Let's see if there's any questions from the committee. Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today. Any other opponents for LB 274? Anyone? Anyone here to testify in a neutral capacity? Welcome.
Thank you. Senator Hunt, members of the committee, my name is Lynn Rex, Lynnrex, representing the League of Nebraska Municipalities. We're here in a neutral capacity today, just to indicate that depending upon how you decide to proceed, law enforcement and others would encourage you to have use of the international symbol. So it's very clear from an enforcement standpoint whether or not someone is supposed to be in that space or not. You may note in Chapter 181736, which is your first section of this bill, it talks about cities and villages designating those places. They also deal with enforceability. So they just want to make sure that it's very clear who can be there and who cannot be there. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Rex. Any questions from the committee? Senator Lowe.
Thank you, Ms. Rex, for being here. I've seen in grocery store parking lots where they've had designated parking spaces for veterans. Do cities do that?
They might. I'm sorry, I don't know.
As a welcome to veterans.
Yeah,
and,
I don't know.
To our community.
My guess is some do, I don't know. But I too have seen at Hy-Vee stores and other locations where they'll have various types of parking designated for seniors, for certain types of folks. So that can be done now by the business itself. But when you're dealing with public parking on the streets and that kind of thing, I think that's what we're really talking about here. And from a law enforcement perspective, just to make sure that there's the use of a universal symbol and that people know who's supposed to be there and who isn't, once you decide how to proceed here.
But you don't know of any cities that just voluntarily put a sign out for veterans
They
specifically?
might, but I'm sorry, I don't know for sure. You know, we can find out and get back to you. We can do a survey monkey of our members and find out and get back to this committee. We're happy to do that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Lowe. Any other questions? Thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Are there any other people who would like to testify in a neutral capacity? Seeing none, Senator Holdcroft, you're invited to close. As he comes up, I'll say we did have ADA accommodation written testimony sent in from Kathy Hull as an opponent, and she was just representing herself, and that was submitted as an ADA accommodation written testimony. And for this bill, we also had 4 letters in support, 2 in opposition, and 1 in the neutral capacity. Senator Holdcroft.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Just a few comments to finish up. First, about the confusion about 100%. I think that came across pretty early on when they were issuing these DAV plates, as was quoted earlier. You could have like a 10% disability for hearing, but if that was 100% related to your service, then you qualified as 100% for and could get the DAV plate. That's no longer the case. Now, to get one of these plates, you must go back to Senator Blood's definition that your disabilities need to add up to 100%, and they can be a combination of hearing, high blood pressure, a lot of things that you incurred. Still 100% within your service related, but it has to add up to 100% to qualify for one of these plates. Now, as I mentioned before, there are 1,340 of these DAV plates, and any future plates will require that they be 100% disabled. So 1,340 plates in the state of Nebraska. There are over 174,000 placards and license plates for handicap parking. Therefore, 1,340 plates equates to less than 1% of that population. So the impact to handicap spots has been advertised, I think, is minimal at best. The other thing that we did was, I didn't know this, but there's actually a civilian group of folks that work underneath the Omaha Police Department that actually patrol to find violators of those who are parking in handicapped spots within the city limits of Omaha. And in 2018, there were 79 all year, 79. And in 2019, there were 88. So again, the impact here, and I would ask for your personal observation of when you pull into a supermarket or parking lot. How many times have you seen all the handicap spots full? Now, I'm sure it happens. And I paralyzed veterans, I'm sure it happens to them because they go to events where they're having a lot of paralyzed veterans that are coming to those events. And my advice to them was, well, call ahead and ask that proprietor there to set up some additional spots. So, or add additional handicap spots for those types of situations where we have a lot of paralyzed veterans coming. So the last thing I'll leave you with is I wanted to keep this a clean bill. This is one of the first bills, as a freshman senator, with 10 days to submit a bill and wanted to do something for disabled vets. And this was just take the plate as is. We don't have to make a new one. There's only, 1,340 of them. It cannot have a big impact, you would think, except for those disabled veterans. And it gets back to, we're not trying to, take away handicap spots, but we want to recognize the sacrifice that these disabled veterans made for their country in their service. And is it such a big deal to give them, a privilege of being able to park a little bit closer to the entrance to these places? So with that, I'll happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Senator Holdcroft. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for bringing this bill.
Thank you, Senator Hunt.
I'll close the hearing on LB 274, and we can move on to LB 346 from Senator Brandt.
You lose a crowd. Thank you.
Welcome, Senator Brandt.
Wow, this is great. This is the first time I've ever appeared in Urban Affairs. It's taken me 5 years to get here. Good afternoon, Vice Chair Hunt and members of the Urban Affairs Committee. I am Senator Tom Brandt, Tombrandt. I represent Legislative District 32, Fillmore Thayer, Jefferson, Saline, and southwestern Lancaster counties. Today I'm introducing LB 346. LB 346 would make a simple change to the Local Option Municipal Economic Development Act, or LB 840 program, as it's often referred to. As the law is currently written, the definition of a qualifying business is much broader for municipalities under 2,500 inhabitants. The bill will raise that number to 5,000 inhabitants. The reason for this change is that the definition of a second-class city is a municipality with a population of up to 5,000 inhabitants. This would make it more clear that cities in the second class, such as Hickman, Fairbury, David City, Ashland, Aurora, and Wahoo, have this greater flexibility to attract businesses to their community. The act empowers cities to take charge of their own economic development by allowing them to levy a local sales tax for the purpose of promoting economic development and revitalizing their communities. This will allow communities to fund initiatives that will attract new businesses and investment, create jobs, and improve the quality of life for residents. The Local Option Municipal Economic Development Act also recognizes the importance of collaboration and partnership between cities and counties by working together. Local leaders can leverage the strengths of their communities to achieve greater success in promoting economic development and improving the quality of life for residents. This collaborative approach will help to build stronger, more resilient communities that are better able to face the challenges of the future. Thank you for your time. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Senator Brandt. Any questions from the committee? Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, Senator Brandt, for bringing this bill. Welcome to the Urban Affairs Committee. I still get to bring a bill to this committee, but how many towns are between 2,500 and, cities are between 2,500 and 5,000?
There will be somebody from the league testifying right behind me that can answer that question for you. And if not, we'll get you that information.
Thank you.
I used to know that, but I wish I still did. That would be really impressive. Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Senator Brandt. Any proponents for LB 346? Welcome to your Urban Affairs Committee.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Thank you, Urban Affairs Committee members. My name is Tom Goulette, TOMGOULETTE. I'm the city administrator for the city of West Point and utility superintendent. The city of West Point is a community of 3,500 people. We are very much engaged in the LB 40 program in our community. And what we're always looking for is flexibility to provide services and businesses to our community. We have a very viable Main Street. And one of the opportunities that we're always looking at are the service industries. As you know, West Point is a very ag-driven community, and services are a huge part of our community. To a point, the LB 840 program, as it's currently written, is, I don't want to say exempting that, but it makes it a little more difficult to produce that. And so this would give our community of 3,500 a lot more flexibility in how we can apply that LB 840 program. The other thing is when we were looking at this, we were looking at it from the statutory standpoint of, as Senator Brandt said, how the communities are divided, first class, second class, and villages. So this would kind of coincide with that and remove the 2,500. I'd like to thank Senator Brandt and the League of Nebraska Municipalities for helping us sponsor this. And if there's any other questions, I would be happy to try to answer.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from the committee? Senator Hardin.
Thanks for being here.
Sure.
Are you aware of any other categories of definitions within first class, second class, and villages that might be knocked over in the process of redefining the size? And for example, I'm wondering out loud about things like retirement.
Right. Not that I'm aware of that define it less than what the statutory requirements currently are. Not that I'm aware of anyway.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Senator Hardin. Any other questions? Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you for being here. It was Gillette.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Gillette. Can you just give us like one example of what you can't do currently that you would be able to do with this change?
Well, the way the LB 840 is currently structured, it centers around retail sales. And when you get into insurance companies, you know, the guy wants to open a local brokerage firm and is looking for LB 840 assistance, whether you're a hairstylist or a barber providing assistance in the community, all the way down to, for example, an equipment repair person, those type of things that don't involve retail sales. That helps us promote those businesses within our community.
So currently you can promote retail sales, but not services?
Right, it doesn't specify that, right?
Gotcha. But under 2,500, you could promote services.
Right, it takes that proposal to your local city council for approval.
Okay.
And the citizen advisory committee that drives LB 840.
Thank you.
Sure.
Do we have any other questions? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Any other proponents? Welcome to Urban Affairs. Please state and spell your name.
Thank you, Senator Blood and members of the Urban Affairs Committee. My name is Christy Abraham, CHRISTY here representing the League of Nebraska Municipalities and the Nebraska Economic Development Association. We also want to thank Senator Brandt for introducing this bill. This was something that came through our league legislative process. West Point came to us and said they would like to broaden their authority of qualifying business, and so here we are today. I want to give just a brief, I promise, dear senators, very brief background on what LB 840 is. As you heard Senator Brandt call it the Local Option Municipal Economic Development Act, it doesn't roll off the tongue. So we call it LB 840 because that is the bill that originally put this into place. There was a constitutional amendment in 1990 that actually made this an exception in the Constitution to the prohibition of lending credit of the state. So as you all know, in Nebraska, you can't be a municipality and just give money to a private entity. That is not okay. So under LB 840, there's an exception that says, look, for economic development programs, you can give public resources to qualifying businesses. So what happens in a municipality is there's lots of steps before you can have one of these plans. You have to put together a plan, the city council or village board has to vote on it, and then most importantly, it goes to the vote of the people in that municipality. They actually vote to decide, do we want an LB 840 program in our community? It indicates what source of fund is going to be used. Most municipalities use sales tax. That's what they decide to use. But you could use other things. Some communities do use property tax to fund their LB 840 programs. There are 77 municipalities in the state that have LB 840 programs. And Senator Kavanaugh, to answer your question, there's actually 19 cities that are going to benefit from this legislation. So I'm sorry that I always talk with my hands, but there are 19 cities between the population of 2,500 and 5,000. So as Senator Brandt mentioned, it's Hickman, Valentine, David City, Valley, Central City, Ashland, Minden, Auburn, Gothenburg, Broken Bow, O'Neill, West Point, Cozad, Falls City, Waverly, Aurora, Wahoo, Ogallala, and Fairbury. So sort of our larger cities of the second class. I couldn't find any legislative history as to why 2,500 was picked as the population, as to allowing those municipalities to have this broader definition of what a qualifying business is. But as you heard Mr. Gillette comment, this just makes things sort of consistent. So every city of the second class understands, okay, we've got this broader definition of qualifying business than other municipalities do. So again, we just want to thank Senator Brandt for introducing this. We think this is a great bill. It's going to be of great use to those 19 municipalities that I mentioned, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions? Senator Lowe.
Thank you, Senator Blood, and thank you, Ms. Abraham, for being here.
Sure.
Is there a downside from increasing from 2,500 to 5,000?
Is there a downside?
Is there a downside? Will they lose anything in the process of increasing the number?
No, I think that's a great question. And if there was, and I could think of one, I would tell you. It's not just because I'm totally supportive of this bill that I'm going to say I can't think of one. I think the only thing it's going to do is really benefit those 19 communities to say they just have a lot more flexibility that, as Mr. Gillette said, if some sort of service-related or retail business moves in that doesn't exactly meet the definition of qualifying business, that municipality can help them and say, look, we're able to give you these local funds to help you locate here or expand here. So I think it's really just a win-win.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lowe.
Any other questions? Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Senator Blood, and thank you, Ms. Abraham, for being here and for answering my first question. So next question is, what are the population limits, or what's the definition of first-class city, second-class city, and village?
Okay, that is a great question. Do I say that about every question? So a definition of a city of the second class is between 801 and 5,000. If you're a village, you're 800 or less. If you're a first-class city, you're between 5,000 and 100,000. And then, of course, you have Lincoln at 100,000 to 400,000, and then Omaha is over 400,000.
So what's the reason that we put a population limit in here as opposed to saying cities and cities of the second class and villages?
That's a great question. And as I mentioned, I went back through the legislative history and I couldn't find exactly why 2,500 was picked. My guess is the public policy reason was we want to make sure in the smallest municipalities, they have this extra flexibility. And so they picked that number. I don't know why they didn't align it with what the definition of is of city of the second class.
And I know we've historically redefined the bounds of a city of the primary class, whatever Lincoln's called, right?
Right.
To keep them in that class as opposed to a metropolitan class.
Right.
Or is that, we're not supposed to say that out loud?
I think there was a bill last year that did that. Yeah.
But so have we done that similarly with these other categories to kind of, even as smaller communities grow, that they don't move up a class or down a class or?
No, the only change that I know of, Senator Kavanaugh, is that moving Omaha up to 400,000 or more to sort of keep them as the only metro size, and then to have Lincoln be the only primary size city. And as you know, they're both growing and growing and growing. But I haven't been aware of any change to the definition of first class, second class, or villages.
I'm just curious if maybe we had made a mistake in setting a limit, and then we changed the definition of secondary class to up to 5,000, and then now we're just catching up to it or something.
No, that would be a great guess, but I don't believe that's it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Thanks, Senator.
Any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Anybody here to testify in the neutral? Seeing none, Senator Brandt, you're welcome to close.
As you heard Mr. Golette from West Point state, they are an ag community, and it gives them a lot more flexibility. You know, Ms. Abram, this is an expander of economic development, rural Nebraska, and I see it as with no other options. Fairbury, perfect example. I live in Jefferson County. Fairbury is my county seat. 7,500 people in the whole county. City of Fairbury is about 3,900 people. We do not have an economic developer. I think I've only got 2 economic developers in my whole district, which ironically are in Fillmore and Thayer, my 2 smallest counties. I would suspect at the time that was probably the rationale for 2,500 or less, is these towns and villages have nobody to write these grants. And I know just in our small community of Plymouth, when we apply to Union Pacific or anything, we try and get somebody from the community to do this, and it's very frustrating. They're not professional grant writers, and so quite often they're in competition with cities that are. So I would guess at the time it was a break for the rural communities. It does take a vote of the people to pass the LB 840 program. So it isn't like your city council can just decide, oh, we're going to do this. No, the people in the town have to do it. Quite often in the past, I've seen communities like Hebron and Geneva, which are underneath that threshold. They will come out and say, hey, if we pass this program, we're going to use these funds for X or for some specific things initially. And when they get past that, they quite often listen to the community on where they can use these funds. And with that, I would take any questions.
Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Senator Brandt. I couldn't let you go without asking at least the hard questions. So just to clarify though, these are funds that come from the community. They create a program, they capture the funds. If Plymouth starts doing this, it's not going to take money away from.
It's an additional tax.
But within that community.
Within that community,
right?
yes.
So they're not directly competing with other communities for the money. They may be competing for whatever tourism or whatever you're.
Yeah, and Plymouth's a great example. We actually have a lot of viable business there, retail. And so we have a city sales tax that they use for improvements to the park and small things like that. The smaller your communities, quite often, the less the need. Because a lot of our communities in the 32nd district, we have 43 towns and villages, have nothing beside houses and a water tower. I mean, there's nothing left. They don't have a retail business, the post office, and we can't tax that. And then, usually you might have maybe a bar, and, that's about it. And, they're hanging on to what they've got. And they have no illusion that, they're going to have an active Main Street anymore. So I think when you get up to this size of city, those 19 between that 2,500 and 5,000, quite often are county seats out there. And they're doing some exciting things. You go to Geneva or the small town of Friend and you see what those people are doing. Crete's a little bigger, but I mean, it's really exciting in rural Nebraska what some communities are pulling off.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Senator Brandt.
Thank you.
And that closes the hearing on LB 346. And ends our hearings for today. Thank you.
I was like, "Stop asking questions."